If you have not played Xenoblade Chronicles 1, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, or Xenoblade Chronicles Torn of the Golden Country, then I strongly recommend that you click away from this video. I am going to take all aspects of those three games, story elements included, and apply the knowledge I have of them to this just 2 minutes and some supplementary materials provided by Nintendo articles of trailer footage that we have here, and break down a lot of the elements that'll be prevalent in Xenoblade Chronicles 3, including locations we'll be going to, potential character motives, and breaking down what events in past games may have greater implications in this as well. Forgot to mention, but also this includes Future Connected, as I forgot to mention it earlier, but there's a very big thing that happened in that I know is going to have a lot of significance in here, but let's not waste any more time. This video is long enough as is, so the way I'm going to be structuring this is I'm going to talk about the characters first and some of my thoughts on what their backstories and potential motives could be. Then I want to break down the trailer somewhat, and then I'm going to present my theory for how I think the narrative of this game is going to pan out. So without further delay, let's get into those characters. Alright, in case you couldn't tell, I'm very tired as I've tried recording this video 3 separate times now, making this attempt number 4, but I wanted to do it right, so I'm going to talk about first the two nations that are at war with each other, as that'll set the backdrop for the motives and a lot of information about all of these characters. First we have the nation of Keves is what I'm going to be calling it, as that aligns more with the Japanese pronunciation based on the spelling of that. So Keves is a technology-based nation that fights with mechs that are piloted. This is based off of the world that was created from Xenoblade Chronicles 1. Leading into that, we have the other kingdom, Agnus, which is ether-based, and it has mechs themselves, but they operate autonomously without a pilot, and this nation is based off of the Titans from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. This is important to know as we get into our first protagonist here, Noah. Noah is effectively the Monado wielder of this game, based from the sick red sword he's got, and can I just talk about how awesome his design looks? I mean, all of the characters look incredible, but Noah is by far the sleekest looking protagonist out of the ones we've had so far. I know people have made jokes about how he's a mix of Flynn from SMT4, Reen from Trails of Cold Steel, and I do see a little bit of Lloyd Irving from Tales of Symphonia, but put all that together, and you got a good looking design here. He seems to be somewhat jovial in terms of his personality based on the snippets of conversation we hear between him and Mio, but given the fact that all of the party members that come from Keves that we've seen so far are all soldiers, he has to have a bit more of a hardened personality when compared to Shulk or Rex, who were a bit more lighthearted. Granted, Shulk was a bit more serious and a bit of a nerd, but we don't really know what Noah's personality is yet, and I look forward to seeing that unravel. There's also the elephant in the room I want to address here, and that's Noah's name. It's a clear reference to Noah's Ark, as a lot of Xeno names kind of have these blatant references to them, such as Rex. Maybe he was a king, considering Rex is the Latin word for king, so maybe he was the ruler of Agnus as it was being developed, or maybe its first king. Just some food for thought. With regards to the story that his name would be based off of, Noah's Ark, this may imply that Ionios, the name of this new world of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which means age enduring, isn't actually that enduring, considering that Noah's Ark happens after the whole world gets flooded, and essentially all of humanity aside from his family and some animals are wiped off the face of the planet. I don't think the implications are going to be that drastic, but it's some food for thought. Now, let's move on to the next party member I want to talk about. Lons is what I'm going to go with. Lons is Lance, but not with the CE at the end, but with the Z, but this is British localization, so it's actually a Z, is looking like he's going to be the Rhine of the party, as he is friends with both Noah and Uni, and I think y'all know who she is by this point. Lons is Machina. No, he is not Indoline, nor do I think he is a mix of Hums or Machina, but he is definitely Machina in some way. Whether he's a mixed race, we don't know yet, but I'll explain my theory for that later. That said, a lot of people might be confused as to how this person with no machine parts on them could be Machina. If you remember the models from Xenoblade Chronicles 1, the younger Machina were effectively just Hums infants that were moving around within these pods around them. There are other Machina that also had fleshy aspects about them as well. Vanea was definitely the greatest reminder of this, but the Machina were not purely mechanical. There was some organic life in them as well, so So it's worth remembering that when taking a look at Lanza's design here, as it's more so humanoid compared to any other Machina we've seen so far, which may mean that the Machina that have descended from the action of Shulk, as we saw at the end of Xenoblade Chronicles 1, they didn't lose their mechanical parts, but maybe something changed that made them want to shed them in order to fit in more with the life of Bionis. Who knows? Also, some people like to say that Dunban and Vinaya hook up at the end of the game. Not really sure about that, as if this could maybe be their child based on the mix of Ahams and Machina. It wouldn't be too far-fetched to say that they could have kids together, but that's yet to be seen. Just putting some more ideas out there. Lastly, I want to get into everyone's new waifu, Uni, the High Entia of the party. She seems to be somewhat of a mix between Rein and Sharla, as she definitely has Rein's personality, whereas she has Sharla's combat style, as she is the healer of the party, and we know that her staff is also a gun, so it's a gun staff, I guess. There's also the interesting fact that Uni is a High Entia that doesn't have white hair. In Xenoblade Chronicles, pretty much all of the High Entia had some shade of white or silver hair about them. There's also the fact that her wings seem to be a black shade or a different color at other points in the trailer, but I think that's just lighting and I don't think there's too much to be gleaned from that, but hopefully I'm wrong about that, as that'd be really interesting. There are some more details about Uni that I do want to get into later when I talk about the trailer, but now that I've mentioned all the party members from Keves, this brings up the common theme between all of them. Each of them has a tattoo on some part of their body. We know that all three of our current party members from Keves are soldiers, and I'm gonna go ahead and assume that this means that the tattoos mark them as soldiers of Keves. Uni's tattoo is on her chest, Lanza's is on his chin, and Noah's tattoo is on the hand that he wields the Monado with. I know that's not what's reflected in his artwork here, but in the trailer, you can see visibly the tattoo on his hand that he's swinging the Monado with. I think they drew him grabbing the Monado with his offhand here for one of two reasons. One, left-handed characters look more cool and that's just how it is. But second, I think they just wanted to really show off the tattoo here, as it's visible in both Lanza and Uni's artwork, and it'd be really awkward for them to not show it in Noah's. We don't know what this tattoo means or what it symbolizes, but I'm gonna go with it being a brand of a Kevesian soldier, which is what I'm gonna go with for the name of the people of Keves. Now with that out of the way, let's get into the people of Agnus that we've seen from this party, which admittedly do have a bit less information about them. So getting right into it, let's talk about the girl we all thought was Nia for about 90 seconds, and that is our second protagonist of the game, Mio. The only thing that we really know about Mio is that she is also a soldier of Agnus, and we also know that she is an Offseer like Noah. I didn't mention this with Noah because I wanted to talk about it here, but Offseers seem to be the soldiers of the armies that mourn for the fallen, if I had to take a guess as to what they do. I do have some more speculation as to what I think their role could be and why they seem to be so prevalent, as the flute being the main motif for the music of this game is going to have a big role with regards to what they do for their armies, but not a whole lot to be gleaned here. We know she looks very similar to Nia, and the popular theory seems to be that she is a blade that has been awoken by Nia, and I kind of buy that statement. I was just saying, well, this is her daughter, but then the blade theory makes more sense, as we learned from Hayes and Laura that a strong resonance can lead to the blade having a lot of similarities to their driver, and in this case there are a lot, and I mean a lot of similarities here, so it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. But this brings me to the character that I personally am most excited for. Forget Mio, forget Uni, forget your waifus. Let me talk about my boy Taion. This man is the drip king. Easily my favorite design out of all the characters we've seen so far. This man doesn't have drip. This man is so drippy that he has soak. He is just, his design is beautiful. I love the orange scarf, the way his shoes have the cross symbols on them, how he's got his coat, has the orange triangles with the seams going on them. This boy is just oozing in beautiful design here. It's just, damn. He looks so good, and to top it all off, he's got those smug, thick frame glasses that honestly, it kind of fits the personality that we were given of him, as he has the most personality from what we understand of his descriptors, as Taion is a tactician who fights alongside Mio and uses his smarts and insights, at least that's what we're told from the Nintendo UK website. So this tells us that Taion is a cunning character. The fact that he is a tactician of the Agnus army means this guy's got to be very smart. He kind of has those vibes of Akos because they both have those thick frame glasses, so I kind of get those vibes from him as well. He also kind of resembles your boy HB from X, and he was also kind of he was definitely he was a prodigy character, so I feel like he's going to be a very interesting, somewhat pragmatic individual, and I'm really interested to see how he pans out. I think he is the only party member of Agnus that we've seen so far that is not a blade. I'm going to go ahead and put that theory out there, as we don't know. He may have a core crystal that's just concealed very well, so maybe he could be a flesh eater as well, like Neo was. We don't really know, but my theory is that if he is not a blade, that he is Leftherian, as I say theory, but I'm pretty sure he's Leftherian. If he ends up being like a blade eater or something like that, then he'll be of Leftherian cells in him. But that's because if you look into the trailers, you can kind of see that he has golden eyes. So this leads me to believe that maybe he's a descendant of Corinne, and maybe the Leftherians will have a big role in this game. There is a part in the trailers that looks like it could be Leftheria, but I'm going to save that for later. So I think that Taion is going to be a Leftherian, and that'll have some big significance, as that'll make him tangentially related to Rex as an extension, so we need to see where that goes. Then finally, we have probably the least information we have on any character, Senna. All we know is that she's strong. That's it. That's like a personality trait according to the website, which, no, it isn't, but there is a little bit we can glean from this. Senna is a blade, very clearly. She has the blade line, she has the core crystal visible, and she's clearly a mix of three blades, I would say prominent blades from Xenoblade 2, as she definitely has remnants of Brigid with the, I don't know how else to call this, like the frosted tip she's got going on in her hair, the blue that gleams at the end of her hair, that has remnants of Brigid. And her design is very similar to Cassandra, who is a blade that you get from Morardain, so there's that, like, I guess design elements taken. I don't think she'll be connected in that way, just like Cassandra is one of the more popular blades, so I think they said, let's take this design. And then the lines on her remind me strongly of Electra, who is also a shield hammer, and she's quite commonly the first blade, or one of the first blades a lot of people get, so maybe the fact that a lot of people would recognize that blade is why they took some elements from her design and put it on her as well. But my guess is that she is most likely a blade that was awoken by Brigid. Now, what that could imply is that maybe Brigid became a flesh eater, and that she maybe took Morag cells, as they were the only ones. There was the only group that didn't really have that kind of blade connection, aside from Tora, of course, but Tora had the artificial blade, which made him special in that sense. And so there's also a part that strongly hints that she's definitely Ardanian, and I think that Senna will have that connection of Brigid. Now, if Brigid has awoken this blade, what implications happen from there, and what does this mean for Morag? Does this mean Morag may be alive in this timeline because she became a blade eater? This also means that Zeke is I'd say Zeke is like pretty much alive and going to be in this game somehow, but we know there's some theories revolving around that, and that brings me to the trailer. So, I mean, we're going to end it off there, but we know that we have the Shulk Reinfura dynamic of Noah, Lons, and Uni, as even Lons, I mean, Uni, Ryan's just like harsh personality with Charlotte's playstyle, could be a descendant of that. Lons just like has the Ryan playstyle as like the tank with the sword shield he's got going on, and then Noah's just gonna be our typical protagonist, just slashing through stuff. But then Mio, Twin Rings, we don't know if she's a healer because Uni is one. Maybe she can have a healer sub role. Taion looks like the mage, quote unquote, even though that's not really a Xenoblade archetype. And then Senna is probably gonna be another tank, could be an agility tank like Brigid. So that's what I think of the roles, but I want to get onto the trailer now and break down a lot of the stuff in there, as I really want to get to the areas, because each area they show, I can tell you where they are based on the previous games. But before I can get to that stuff, we gotta break down a good minute of the trailer first. Thankfully, the first 20-30 seconds of it doesn't have too much, as we open with Noah in his Kevesian uniform, as he's in all black, as opposed to the red coat we see him in his artwork, and he's playing the flute, most likely performing his off-seer duties, as we know that the theme of this game is life, and the flute is an instrument that is heavily associated with life and death, and more ethereal natures of things, so that's a good start. So that's a good shot to start off on. Then we transition to what I can only assume are Kevesian soldiers using some Tron-looking technology. As the weapons they're using, it almost looks like they have broadsword Monados and just like heavily powered like automated machine gun type weapons, and they are using these in a war, and then it transitions to an image of a giant face unit. Now, based on the fact that we know that the mechs are piloted in Keves, we don't know what type of person could be piloting this. Could it be that just the way face units were in 1 could be re-implemented in here, and that maybe we do have a Homs Machina that kind of adopted the armor and just agreed to be turned into that? Maybe they found a way to make it much less, I guess, damaging to the Homs that would serve as the host or the vessel for this face unit. Who really knows? But we then transition to seeing the party members fight, we get some snippets of dialogue, and I think a lot of people are right in their assumption that we may have the two groups start out independently before, I'd say like a third of the way through the game, they finally meet up, and then we see Van Damme, who will join them together. Now, do I think this is our Van Damme that we know from 2? No, but I'm not going to completely scratch it off the table, but there's one key thing that makes me say it's not him, and that's the lack of scales on him. As we know, Urians have a defining feature of being covered in some sort of scales around kind of the lower parts of their faces, almost like a scale beard in a sense, but Van Damme did have that trait, and it's not visible on this one here. I struggled to believe this would be our Van Damme if he got reincarnated and that he wouldn't have those features about him, but maybe he also lost an eye in the process along the way. Who's to really say? Now, there are some theories that this is either Rex or Zeke. I'm gonna go ahead and say it's most likely not Rex. Again, nothing's off the table, but I don't really buy that one. Zeke is a bit more plausible because of the eye patch. Maybe he actually lost an eye and actually needs it now, ironically enough. But I think what this is most likely going to be is a descendant or an offshoot of someone related to Van Damme, mostly because of the fact that Van Damme was actually Urian nobility, as his true name was, I'm gonna butcher this, Aquila Pornet Sol Esteriol, and that was the name he had before he took up the moniker of Van Damme, as Van Damme was the name he took as he admired someone. So that does kind of lend some credence to the Rex theory, as Rex would have taken Van Damme's name as Van Damme himself took it, but not entirely sure on that. I also don't think Rex is going to be an eternal being, as some people seem to think. I think Rex is dead, but we'll see how this pans out. I think this is a descendant of Van Damme. An Urian prince just doesn't have the features for whatever reason anymore, as we don't see other Urians in the trailer to compare them to, but he is the one that seems to be the catalyst for unifying our groups together. And then we transition to several Offseers of the Kevesian army as in the same outfit that Noah had, and then it focuses on this one that seems to be probably a descendant of Shulk and Fiora, as they have blonde hair, so they're definitely going to be an important character. Party member, don't think so, but I think a prominent NPC that could be sort of a mentor to Noah initially, or something along those lines. It's also important to note that they have a lot of wisps around them, similar to what Noah had in the original shot of the trailer, that opening scene that we see. I don't really know what area that is in, but it's something that we'll have to explore later. It could be an early thing, or it could be something that happens even later in the game when he dons the uniform again for whatever reason. Then we transition to that same cutscene where we saw Noah, Lons, Mio, and Uni fighting, or rather not Uni, it was Senna, but here we see apparently Uni and Tyon fighting, as Uni's dress here is something I want to make a note of, but I'll come back to it later, as she's shouting at Tyon, but then he says, "They're not your friends anymore, they're his fuel." Giving me some heavy Zanza vibes, but he's dead. But again, I want to make a note of this specific point later, and get to that with my theory for the spoiler crafting I'm going to go into. Next we talk about, or rather, next we see Van Damme talk about what we can only assume are the events that happen into the destruction of Uriah, as he says the land was pierced by a great sword, and then we see a bunch of different areas in the game, and these comments imply that the event of Uriah getting opened up by the Mechonis is relatively recent, probably no more than a century old of an event in history, and the scene of the Kevesians fighting, and then we do have some screenshots from the articles on Nintendo's website of the Agnusians, I don't know what else to call them, going to war, most likely being provoked by the attack on Uriah. So I think that's kind of like the Sword Valley catalyst where we see Dumban, Mumkar, and Dixon fighting. These screenshots that we have here, this footage in the trailer, is from the moment of when whoever utilized the Mechonis sword attacked. So that's where my theory leads to. But next, let's break down all of the areas we're going to get to explore, as they show quite a few. The first one we see is Noah running through what appears to be Gour Plain, as those waterfalls were similar to the ones that were visible there, so I think that one checks out, and this may just be the straight up first area of the game we explore. The next area we see is the Fallen Arm, as Noah is running right on the distant fingertip secret area. There's also the fact that there's an item more visible, to which I say, thank you, Monolith, for getting rid of collection points. They broke up the flow of gameplay, and they just weren't that interesting, and honestly, it didn't really mitigate the RNG that much because some things just didn't make sense when you got the collection point. So yeah, item worth being back, very good change in my opinion, very good change in my eyes, and I think a lot of people seem to be in agreement on that. Another thing that's worth noting here is that Valak Mountain is visible in the distance, so it may be that we get to see one of the most beautiful areas in one again, but this is the only shot we get of it in the trailer. I'm hopeful we get to go back there, and I'm sure we will, since they know that this is a very much a fan favorite area. The next area that we see is the Bionite Shoulder from Future Connected, and we see the Mechonis sword in the distance. Now, if the shoulder is still high up, which I don't see any reason for it not to be, this kind of shows the scale of how massive the Mechonis sword is and how devastating the attack on Uriah really was. Speaking of which, I think the area that we see Mio running through here is the remnants of Uriah. It could be Satoral Marsh, but considering we had Noah running through a bunch of areas that are associated with Kevis, which has landmarks from Xenoblade 1, I think it makes sense for Mio to start running in an area that be associated with 2, and this being an exposed Uriah would make the most sense to me, as Uriah was within the Titan before, hence how it had all this water and it was really protected and the light just came through the translucent skin of the Titan, but now that it's been opened up, it's been exposed to the elements, and that's why you don't see these springs anymore. Everything is arid. The foliage now turns to this orange color instead of this bright pink. This is what I'm leaning towards being just the aftermath that we'll get to explore, and it may be one of the final areas that Mio and her gang go through before encountering Noah and his crew. But next, we see Lons running into a base, and it also seems to be based in the same area as Uriah, just another part of it, but it also is similar to the base of Valak Mountain as you transition into Sword Valley, and I think this might be the area where he's going to. It just leads into the Fallen Arm area now, because Sword Valley doesn't really exist because, well, the Mechonis sword is now upright. If we explore that somehow, that'd be sick, but I don't really know how that would pan out yet. Next, we see for a brief moment Senna is running to what is clearly a Neo Morardane, further linking her to Bridget, as I was saying before, and more or less confirming her in my eyes as an Ardanian as a little nod here. Next, we see Machna Falls, as there's a giant robot in the lake here, which is most likely the one they fight later in the trailer, but this place confirms that Machna Forest is going to make a return alongside another screenshot. But before we get to that one, we see Tyon walking towards what is the High Entia tomb. This means that Aerith Sea is going to be in here, and there's also a shot of that later, but we don't know why the High Entia tomb is pretty easily accessible. There seems to be a camp built right outside of it, and my guess is that this is going to be sort of a base for the Kevesian army. I do have an idea as to what faction it could be, but I'll get to that later. Now, what we see is Mio grinding on rails that connect the islands that were in Aerith Sea together, and we can see Alchemoth in the distance. The big question here is, why is Aerith Sea no longer lush? We know why it's not a sea anymore. It was part of the Bionis head, and that's fallen, so hence no water, but is that what caused the lack of greenery? Most likely, but why are there no teleporters between these areas now, as there were back in the original game? What was the need for putting grind rails as opposed to keeping the technology for teleportation there? Was it just moved to be utilized within Alchemoth? Or is there another reason, and maybe there was an attack on Alchemoth that destroyed them all? It could be explained away in that, due to the events of Future Connected, the Fall King just wiped them all out, which I might buy, but I feel like there may be something a bit more sinister in this implication here. Next, we see more of Machna Forest, and here we see basically a confirmation of 4 party members, as we see Mio, Lons, Noah, and Senna all working together as a group. So it'll be interesting to see a main series Xenoblade game that has 4 party members as opposed to the established 3. Finally, we end on shots of, I want to say this is very Tornin-esque, but due to the fact that Leftheria has a strong connection to Torna as well, it could be that this is the remnants of Leftheria, hence why we see a bunch of water and all these boats and creatures living around them because of the fact that Leftheria was kind of this floating island, and now that it's fallen into the sea here, all of those would be scattered around in this new archipelago. It was already called an archipelago when it was floating in the air, so I don't see why that would change now that it's in the ocean. That said, this all bears a very strong resemblance to Torna, and I wouldn't be against the idea that this could be Torna, as that could open up the possibility of other fallen titans being in this game, as now we can explore new areas like Judicium or Sia that were titans that fell during the Aegis War. So if it is Torna, that has more possibility, but Leftheria seems to be the more likely connection, especially with Tyon, who I'm sticking with being Leftherian. Then we get into more parts in the trailer where Mio says she'll help out Noah. Then we see the Rex and Pyra Nopon. I'm just gonna pretend I didn't see them. I don't know what they are. They may be the Nopon party member, maybe a 2-for-1, maybe it's just the Rex one that joins. I'm wasting too much time thinking about this. I'm not even gonna try and figure it out. But I'm gonna skip a little bit ahead here, but we see Melia and Nia. We know it's them. And then we get to the ending shot where we see Noah and Mio playing their flutes as they turn to face the Urian Titan and the Mechonis sword in front of them. Now, from here on out, I'm gonna talk about the parts of the trailer that I've skipped over and want to consolidate into what I think is going to be the overarching plot or the themes of Xenoblade Chronicles. We know that it's about life, but I want to expand on that and say how specifically life plays a role with the overarching conflict of this. So if I'm right, you could be heavily spoiled on a lot of the plot elements of the game here, so if you want to go in completely blind, not even think about this stuff, end the video here and just go off and enjoy the speculation yourself, because I think I'm pretty close on the money with this. So I know, it's stupid to say that I have spoilers of a game that hasn't come out yet, but I think I figured out a lot, so if you genuinely don't want to have any idea on this stuff, don't blame you for leaving the video now. I hope you enjoyed my speculation, as I'd love to make more Xenoblade stuff in the future, but let's get into what I'm going to call the longevity theory. Alright, let me start with Uni and her being in this black dress here. I believe that Uni is going to be part of what I'm going to call the Neo-Bionite Order. For those who don't remember, the Bionite Order was the group of assassins that worshipped the Bionis that Tyrea was originally a part of. Seeing as how they all got turned into Telethia, and Tyrea is realistically the only surviving member, and that Melia basically put her in command of this stuff during a quiet moment in Future Connected, it seems that Tyrea has created this group, which Uni is a part of, and considering that Tyrea was focused on her research, which involved trying to figure out how to get the Telethia back into Hyentia form, I believe that Uni being a medic kind of implies that instead of being a group of assassins, this group is a team of doctors, or healers in some sense, and maybe they have some combat capabilities because Tyrea wanted them to be able to hold their own, just as she can. I do think that they will have a far greater role in the story, but it's unclear what it'll be, but I think Tyrea's research and the fact that Uni is a healer has a strong connection to them. I also believe that the placement of Uni's tattoo on her chest may be part of the fact that all who join this Neo-Bionite Order have to wear this uniform, and their tattoo needs to be in this exposed part of their chest, and they can put it wherever there, but it's all to show that they're a part of the soldiers. You don't have that tattoo, you're just a spy trying to get in. Sounds like something that Tyrea would implement into her group, but the next thing I want to get into here is the fact that Uni mentions these clocks that need to be filled, but mentions that they don't replace the friends they've lost. My theory is that all people of Keves, Machina, Hyentia, maybe Nopon too, all have equalized lifespans now. This is achieved through whatever these clocks are, and I believe that the Offseers of Keves have the ability to take the souls of the departed who died before their time and harness that into some sort of life energy. This would be the reason as to why Keves instigated a war by attacking Uriah. as for what the Offseers and Agnus do, I'm less certain of this, but if blades and core crystals are still a thing, which may be the case, then perhaps the Offseers of Agnus will turn any fallen of their kingdom, blade or driver, into one of these core crystals again. Or, for the first time, if it was a driver who had a strong enough connection with their blade and passed away. Regardless, I think both Noah and Mio have certain powers that pertain to the dead, as they see off people as well, and that their flutes are somehow the tool that they use to orchestrate these actions. Circling back to the equalized lifespans though, this is why someone like Lons, a Machina, someone who originally would have lived for 10,000 years approximately, can be childhood friends with someone like a Homs and a Hyentia so naturally, as they all appear to be around the same age group. But this brings me back to Uni's frustration, as these elongated lifespans for the Homs and potentially Nopon seem to be brought about by the deaths of others, and why someone like Mio, someone whose initial appearance is as a flesh eater, is telling a Homs, someone who traditionally has a much shorter lifespan, that they have a lot of time. This is also what I believe Taion is referencing when he says that they're not your friends anymore, they're his fuel, as Uni, someone who is frustrated with the clock system, is wondering how life could be seen as so unimportant. But the big question to me is, who is this he that Taion is referencing to? And is this cutscene really in reference to these clocks, or is it something else altogether? We don't really know yet, as we don't have enough context. Now, this ties into what Melia and Nia say, as, come on people, we know it's them, but Melia says that the Ouroboros abhor this world, while Nia wants them erased without a trace. The Ouroboros refers to the self-eating serpent that is a symbol of immortality. With the fact that Ionios refers to an age that is unending, both Melia and Nia seem to be trying to achieve this goal, but through different means. It looks like Melia is setting up a system of immortality, and if my theory is right, Nia may be setting up a system of reincarnation by enforcing the blade system onto all of her subjects. How could she be doing this? Well, maybe there's a light clock we don't know about yet, as in the cutscene we hear that Mio mentions that the flame clock, it has to go. This flame clock seems to be associated with Keves, and if there is a light one associated with Agnus, perhaps Pyra and Mithra had a falling out, as we haven't seen them anywhere in these trailers, but we know they're going to be in this game. Melia is most likely the instigator of this war, as she wants the power of the core crystals to be able to achieve her immortality. Now, as for motives, we'll need to play the game in order to see truly, but I think Melia was trying to figure out how the hell a species that can outlive her own 20-fold would work in this type of society, as even with some of the quests in Xenoblade Chronicles 1, we know that some of the Machina are concerned by this as well, and maybe this system is initially maintained by this flame clock or some other thing that Mio refers to, and I believe that this system will be maintained initially by having the Machina agree to have their lifespan shortened in order to elongate the Homs, Hyentia, and Nopon. But that system won't obviously last, so this is why Melia is instigating the war in order to get the access to core crystals she'll need to make her plan foolproof. So, TLDR of my theory here, both Melia and Nia are trying to achieve an unending age or a kingdom that'll last forever, and Melia is trying to do this by having her subjects be immortal, whereas Nia wants to do it by creating a cycle of reincarnation through the driver and blade system. And this now brings me to all of the other stuff that I don't really have a basis on, but is just my pure speculation at this point. First thing, Zeke is going to have a role in this game. Will he be a party member? Honestly, maybe, or Pandoria could join us as well. We don't really know what their role is yet. The two Nopon that we saw before that I don't want to think about too much, I think they'll be a duo party member unit, if not a very important character. If I'm right about the flame clock then, if I'm right about the flame clock being tied to Pyra somehow, then this Rex looking Nopon here will be a very important character in the story. This Nopon could very well be the descendant of Tora somehow, and maybe they were just inspired by stories that great-great-great-Grampy Palm Tora used to tell about him. I mentioned earlier that Rex could be a king. I think it's realistic to see that maybe he became the king, quote-unquote, of Leftheria and led the nation that way in order to give it its own fighting chance, as it really was just an unorganized mess from what we saw in 2. And finally, the last one that is just me kind of throwing my Hail Mary. I think the game will have one ending, but I think there will be multiple paths to get to said ending, and that we as the players are going to decide how we get there. This choice will come when we hit about 2/3 of the way through the game, as we have to decide if we side with Melia or Nia, and whichever one you choose will join you as your final party member. I won't say 7th right away, as I do think we'll have maybe 9 party members overall. We just don't know who the other 2 are. I'm leaning towards Zeke and some other returning party member like maybe Mikhail, and once that party member joins you, you will have to fight the other one, not so much as a final boss, but as the big kind of penultimate boss you face before you get to the true final boss, as they will serve as an equivalent of Egil or a Malthus in the previous titles. Although, it would be nice to see Melia and Nia fight together, or we're gonna see them fight together, just not on the same side it looks like. But hopefully I'm wrong and I haven't cracked the code as to what Takahashi has planned. Now, this video has gone on for somewhat close to 40 minutes. I'm very tired as I'm editing all of this. I've been trying to just rewrite, rescript, redo this video. This is the 4th attempt I've done on this, so I'm glad to have it done. But for those of you that sat through all this and listened to my crackpot story idea, how close do you think I am, or what are your ideas as to what you think the central conflict or plot of this game could be, as I just want to be part of more discussions. I'd love to be able to talk to other Xenotubers and just kind of get a discussion going. The game is so close, we have so little time to generate hype for this, and I just can't believe it actually came this soon. I didn't think this would come out until 2024, maybe 2023. The fact that it's coming out this year just blows my mind, but I think is a testament to how talented the team at Monolith really is. So, I don't want to drag this out any longer. There's probably several other analysis videos that haven't come out yet that'll be way better than mine, and I hope those are all equally and I hope those equally add to the discussion, and add some features or things that we haven't seen yet in my video or anyone else's that has been put out yet. I'm kind of rambling and slowly losing my mind, so I'm just going to go ahead and end off here. Thank you all again so much for watching. Really want to hear you guys' thoughts in the comments, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Not with the Xenoblade video, but I'm definitely going to make some more Xenoblade content before we hit September 2022. Assuming the game doesn't get delayed, but doesn't really look like it's going to happen, so I gotta get to work now. Hope to see you guys then. Until then, peace. Holy crap, I need water.